Ooh, ah.
Hello everyone, it's Ryan Liberty, and welcome back to this series on everything that you need to know about PTSD and trauma. In this section, I'm going to be talking about polyvagal theory. Like all theories, polyvagal theory is just a way to conceptualize something that's happening in our bodies, and it is not something that's been proven to be true. Polyvagal theory has to do with the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is a nerve in our body that connects to many different areas that we'll be discussing as we go through this section. The theory is that the vagus nerve has different sections that correspond to specific functions that have evolved over time. Each of these different sections controls the functioning of the ones below it and prevents those from turning on. Two of these sections are in a myelinated part of the nerve, and one of them is in an unmyelinated part of the nerve, and we'll talk about what that means. It's relevant to people with PTSD because when you have PTSD, you may switch into some of these lower functions more often, or maybe even chronically, and that can have health effects for you. The three different stages that we'll be talking about are the social stage, the fight or flight stage, also known as the mobilization stage, and the freeze stage, also known as the immobilization stage. Neuroception. Before we get into the different stages of the vagus nerve, I'd like to talk about neuroception. Neuroception is when your body perceives a novel change in your environment, such as a threat, and it does this unconsciously. This change could also include a change in your physiological state. It's important and relevant to people with PTSD because somebody who's been through trauma may perceive something as a threat that other people would perceive as neutral. Typically, we would think of this as something like a trigger. These triggers will then go on to activate the amygdala, as we talked about in the last section. Neuroception explains why sometimes people with PTSD can know that something is safe consciously and still react to it as though it's a threat unconsciously. Neuroception also explains why people who've been through trauma will switch between the different stages of the vagus nerve more frequently than those who have not. The social stage. The social stage deals with the part of the vagus nerve which is myelinated. Myelin is simply a covering around the nerve that allows the signal to move faster. In the social stage, we're experiencing what we should be experiencing every day. We feel safe, we feel calm, our heartbeat starts to slow down to a normal pace. This part of the vagus nerve is connected to our facial muscles and the muscles in our throat, and it allows us to communicate and interact with people in a social way. The fight or flight stage. The fight or flight stage occurs on a myelinated section of the vagus nerve. You could think of this stage as a mobilizing stage. It prepares the body for action. When we perceive a novel change in our environment, the social stage turns off and this stage comes online. This stage involves different areas of the body that the vagus nerve is connected to, including your ears, your heart, your lungs, and your digestive system. Different changes that we see in this stage include that your social functioning turns off, and that includes your facial muscles relaxing. Your head orients itself towards the noise that you hear or the novel change. Your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, your digestive function decreases, your perspiration increases, and your immune function decreases. The freeze stage. The freeze stage occurs on a part of the vagus nerve that's unmyelinated. This stage could also be thought of as the immobilizing stage. In other words, a play dead stage. We see this kind of behavior in animals like reptiles. When the fight or flight stage can no longer function because we're now perceiving a threat as life-threatening, this stage turns on. During this stage, our heart rate drops and all behavior is slowed down. The vagus nerve and PTSD. The vagus nerve has 3 distinct stages with corresponding functions that have evolved over time. Each of these stages, when activated, prevents the stages below it from activating. This is important to people who have PTSD, as people with PTSD may find themselves slipping into lower stages more often or even chronically, which can have health effects. 3 stages that we've talked about are the social stage, the fight or flight stage, also known as the mobilization stage, and the freeze stage, also known as the immobilization stage. Everything that we've talked about in this section is a part of polyvagal theory, and since it is a theory, none of it has been proven to be true. If you have any comments or questions about polyvagal theory or anything that we've discussed, please leave that below for the community. And if you've been finding that you're enjoying this series on everything that you need to know about trauma and PTSD, please subscribe.